Welcome to the Community ROI podcast. Here, senior community experts, founders, and C-level managers tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how community impacts business growth. By listening to these conversations, you'll get actionable steps on how to connect community goals with business goals to skyrocket business growth while still bringing extreme value to community members. My name is Yurii. I help people and brands shine through communities and personal connections. And my guest is Tony Kershaw, a community strategist with over a decade of experience spanning tech, education, nonprofit, and who led community transformation for brands like Stride, Catch Co, General Assembly, proving that great communities don't just connect people, but they drive tangible results. So, welcome, Tony.
Hey, Yuri. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Finally, we're doing this. And it's like one of the craziest part in the community world. You are also this person who I have first conversation with, like face to face on a podcast. So it's amazing. I'm super happy we are here. And let's just jump straight to the first question. So what's
Let's
your
do it.
definition of a community for business?
Given how I've had so many different positions across tech, education, my definition of community might be a little different than some of your other guests. My definition is all about deep relationships with your core audience. And I want to be deliberate about saying audience because I'm not just talking about customers. I think community really is a complex organism. And the way that I view community, there are sort of three key populations, three key parts of this organism. You have your customers, obviously, the folks who paying for your product or service. Then you have people who I'm particularly passionate about, and those are your fans. And then I think we can talk a little bit about this other group of people who are your champions. When I was working in B2B, community was really strictly defined as this, closed environment for your customers, basically. I think in B2B environments, the relationship is very transactional, very utilitarian. We oftentimes don't, the emotions are sort of like the sprinkles and the cherry on top of the relationship because ultimately we're trying to derive value, right? We're looking for efficiency. We're looking for, how do we get to the bottom line as effectively as possible? And I think a lot of your audience that's going to resonate. But as you know, as a community professional, heart is very much a core part of who we are as people, and trying to um, infuse that into the work that we do, especially in those B2B environments, can be extremely difficult. In consumer brands and B2C sort of environments, I think it's a little bit easier. In fact, I think it's probably inverted. And this is where I have experience with fans and
Mm.
champions. These are people who have that emotional connection to the brand. And these are the people, you especially see this on social media. These are the people who are driving growth. These are people who are driving innovation. These are people who are creating those online moments of virality that, marketing teams want to try to get as many of in a quarter. Fans and champions are the ones that it's harder to sort of quantify the
Yeah.
impact because not all of your fans are customers, right? And not all of your champions are customers. But they're very much a core part of what makes a community feel energetic, and they're the vocal ones. But community to me really is these deep relationships between your customers, your fans, and your champions.
I feel like I totally feel what you're talking about because it's a little bit easier when you have, let's say, just B2C customers or like champions, as you've named it, because those are just simple people who have their some
Right.
jobs they like for some reason your product or service or whatever you are creating community for. They just want to hang out. Yes, of course,
Yeah.
they need some value, but still there are more, let's say, humans. And
Hmm.
still, even in B2B, people are still humans. We're kind
They
of forgetting,
are.
yes, they might be more focused. They might be like, hey, we need business, we need value, like give me, give me, give me. And then, there are a lot of communities out there for startup founders, for C-level people, for founders, etc. And they have still some meetups, they have some retreats, they have some fun activities. I feel like it's all about the circle where you are. It's all about the people who you are surrounded with. Yes, maybe some CEO won't be interested to hang out with some sales experts, for example, or I don't know, with some linear employees. They have made different goals, but then they're the same humans. They have
They are.
children, they have pets,
Yeah.
they are interested, they have similar hobbies. So I feel like it's always about like first, of course, bringing value, like why people came to the community. And then, as you've said, as a cherry on top is like this human personal connections. And
That's where we come in.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So what's your definition of a community goal?
Mm. So you touched on this. So I guess the question is, whether you're in the B2C environment or you're in a B2B environment, how do you connect the work that you do to the person, to the human, the everyday individual who's doing it? And I think that's part of what community's goal is. It's this desired outcome. Let's just look at it from a business standpoint. Um, for a business, the goal for a community might be, to increase, the bottom line. That maybe there's a certain profit number that we're looking at. Maybe there's a certain engagement number we're looking for. Um, but what makes it a community goal and not just the business goal is that there's a shared outcome with the people who are in the community, right? So let's just use that engagement goal. Let's say the business has an engagement goal to increase engagement by X many percent, right? That's the business goal. The community goal would be, as a community member, I want to feel like this community is buzzing. I want to feel like when I log into the community every day, every week, however often that is, I'm incentivized to continue to engage with other members in the community and get value from those interactions. That's the same goal. It might sound a little different, but that's the same goal. And I think, if we add another layer onto that, we want to make sure that, community goals are not at the expense of either members of the community or at the expense of the business. And I think that's a lot of times where we get, challenges as community professionals is how do I balance my business goals with my community's goals? And oftentimes, whether you're a community manager, a senior community professional, that's the tension that we have to grapple with every day because we know and we understand the pain points of what it's like to be a member of the community, to be that human. But then at the same time, we also understand what it means to be, responsible for P&L at an organization and have, a large distributed team who's, working tirelessly to deliver products on time. And sometimes you can't have both things. So, at a very high level, I think at the end of the day, community goals, we have these desired outcomes, and our job, our responsibility is to find the balance between what our business objectives and our business goals are and what our community members' goals and objectives are.
What I hear from what you're saying is kind of like being the bridge between
Mm,
the numbers and emotions, like kind of
yeah.
like creating this two-way street that people are like, yeah, and to your example, businesses, if they have this goal of like grow percentage of engagement, it can be vanity metric because like why should
Yeah.
you care of the percentage of engagement if it's like engagement for the sake of engagement? It's always, you always have to have some goal. And if we're talking about community goal, this goal has to be to help people, bring them value, and also build these human relationships, because otherwise it just won't work, you know?
Ag-
And
Agreed.
what's one community goal of some of the communities that you are working with at the moment, or maybe worked before, that inspires you the most?
Um, so I think, all of the roles that I've had in the past have been, I've been passionate about the communities that I've been a part of. And I think that that's an essential component for making sure that you have the right people on your community team, whether that's an emotional connection, subject matter expertise, the people who are running the community, or what I like to say, stewarding the community, have to be members of the community in some way, shape, or form, because you have to understand what it's like to struggle and deal with the things that bring community members to the community. And your responsibility as, a steward of the community is to advocate for the community's needs. And that's, I think, the unique role that community professionals have in their organizations, whether they are on a formal community team or like in many startup environments. You might be wearing multiple hats, and the hat that you wear that day is sort of serving as the liaison between, the different priorities, both internal and external to the organization. Um, so as far as inspiration goes, I think that's one core part of it. You understand and feel the pain, and you want to do something about it. When I was working at a fishing startup, I'm sure you've noticed all the plants and stuff in the background. I love the outdoors, and one role that I had in the past was working for a fishing startup. And I love to fish, not just because, the thrill of interacting, with a fish on the end of a hook, but or on the end of a line, but because of the emotional and spiritual sort of benefits I would derive from the experience.
Hmm.
And when I was the community manager there, I looked at fishing not, from a product perspective, like, oh, hey, look, we're selling all these cool little, lures and things like that. I viewed community as a place where people who are suffering came to find, other people, wanted to have fun, who wanted to connect with family and friends, and wanted a way to alleviate their suffering. And that's a very maybe radical way of viewing the community, but I think it informed how I spoke to people. It informed the group rules. It informed the strategy for engaging with, tough clients and customers and angry people online. There was a different level of care that I could approach these interactions with. And I think modeling that behavior lended itself to how other community members could interact with each other. Um, this community in particular grew from 9,000 customers into what I call 35,000 fishing fanatics. These were people who, even if they had different political views, and even if, they might have disagreed on, some fundamental values in life, the fact that they were all there, the thing that sort of connected everyone together was the fact that they loved the outdoors. They loved what fishing represented and meant for their lives. And being able to connect with people on that level, transformed the community. There was a positive culture that organically grew the community, which was amazing to see. It really was amazing to see. Um, so, that really inspired me. I felt like, despite all the crazy chaos that was happening around the world, this little corner of the internet where people went to go and, enjoy something and share their passions about, could do that. And they did that with a certain level of respect and care for one another, which was amazing.
Uh, I clearly see the human part here,
Hmm.
because when you're connecting with nature, when you're connecting with people who are having very similar experiences, like it makes you bound. And
Yeah.
I'm also curious, like sometimes it can be that way that humans are happy, everyone is happy, but it doesn't affect business anyhow.
Hmm.
So I'm curious, in your example, how did it affect how did was correlated with a business goal?
Yeah, so in numerous ways. And I think, working at a startup, sometimes it's difficult to communicate the many ways community can impact a business. But I saw it firsthand when, this was around the time of COVID when everyone was locked indoors and we couldn't really do anything. So, our business grew because the only thing you could really do is go outside. And the great thing about fishing is that you can have fun doing it alone. And so, the business, really exploded during that time. But when people came together, it was, again, sort of difficult to sort of navigate how to cultivate those online relationships and
Mm,
translate those back out into the real world. And so, through this community, we were able to, or I witnessed people who are coming into the fishing community, their first time ever picking up a fishing pole or, buying a little lure.
mm,
They would get mentored and coached by people who were way more experienced. Um, when I first joined the organization, that interaction looked very different. People who were new to the community were, would I say shunned? Shunned might be a strong word, but they were not welcomed
mm,
because the people who were fishing already wanted to protect the thing that they cared about from all of these people who they felt like were posers or fake or, just weren't really uh, interested and as passionate as they were. But, as part of this dialogue, one of the things that we worked on was making sure that we could create this welcoming environment and share the stories about why people were interested or approached this new hobby. And what we
mm,
found is that many people were joining the community because maybe they had, fishing experience as a child, and then they never touched fishing again for 30 years. And then we could ask a little more and learn more about why they didn't, fish for 30 years. And the stories that would come out would be stories that very experienced people could resonate with.
yeah,
They learned how to go fishing with a grandparent. They learned how, to go fishing with a relative, and that relative, is not here anymore.
yeah,
And so it's not about the fishing anymore. Now it's about family. Now it's about an emotional connection that they want to preserve or a memory that they want to relive. And when we got to that really deep emotional connection, people didn't want, even if they never fished again, they were still fans of our brand because that was something that they cherished. That was something that we said that we care about as a company. And so, we saw sales increase. We saw interactions in that group encourage people to stay. We saw reduced churn in our subscriptions because oftentimes what will happen is folks would sign up for, a product or service. They'll have a really terrible experience or they'll feel like they're struggling with the thing. And the community served as a place where they could get coached, where they could ask questions, where they could get advice, where they could, you know, um, witness the journey that people like them were going through at the same time. So they didn't feel alone. Even if they were out there fishing by themselves, the fact that they had a community of people, at their fingertips that they could go back and share a photo with or, ask questions, to having that access was invaluable to them. And so, we saw reduced churn, we saw increased subscriptions. The online engagement that we saw obviously translated into, all sorts of benefits for the organization, especially when we had customer service issues. I think that's probably another area that we saw quite a bit of improvement in. Because when folks had order issues or maybe, there was user error, instead of blaming the brand, because oftentimes that's what people do. This thing doesn't work. Well, did you use it correctly? Instead of calling it out directly that way, we could have a sort of softer engagement online publicly so that we saw reduced tickets. It was honestly, it truly was this holistic experience seeing the value that community brought, from a Facebook group or, a social media post across the organization. It truly was.
You know, you talked about this having memories about the first fishing experience and with someone who is not here anymore. People have to be really vulnerable to share this, and they have to have a lot of trust inside. And wow, like going from 9 to 35,000 fishing fanatics, it's not an easy journey. It will never happen overnight. So
Right.
please guide me a little bit through some steps that you've taken to create this culture, to build this space.
Yeah. So I think when we think about the journey, of, let's say, someone who, let's say, this person who might have gone fishing with, grandpa, when they were a kid. They're coming and they learn about a brand that is new, it's fresh, it's very warm and welcoming. That was part of, our brand voice, was to be not this serious professional who catches all these monster, fish. It was more so, we're here to have fun. We want you to have fun, and we want you to have fun with us. And so, trying to translate that into a welcome experience was, part of the work that I initially did when I joined the company. And one way we did that was every week we would highlight members who joined that week, and we called it Welcome Wednesday. And besides just welcoming folks with like a welcome post on Facebook, every week I would take pictures from the group and feature those pictures in sort of like this surprise graphic every Wednesday. And so there was a little bit of delight and surprise. People would log in and check every Wednesday to see if they made the graphic. And we would see people say, wow, hey, that's me. That's amazing. And it wasn't something that we promoted. It wasn't, something where we said we came up with a call to action to say, hey, come post this, come post a picture, and maybe next week you'll see yourself on blah, blah, blah. We didn't do that. This was completely a surprise. This was something that we felt was um, a part of the delight factor that we wanted to create. And it honestly encouraged more people to post pictures of whatever it was, whether it was a picture of them holding up a fish or maybe a picture of, a new product that they bought. We saw more and more pictures week over week get posted across different threads. And that was, again, the type of behavior that we wanted our members to model for each other. And so Welcome Wednesday was an idea that was honestly born from conversations with members at the time. Prior to that, we didn't have, a public forum, so to speak, where new members and experienced members could interact in a meaningful way. And so the call to action on those posts was really to say, hey, shout out where you're from and just, welcome all the new people who are here to fish. And so, in addition to the surprise and delight factor of that graphic, where we'd feature, different people every week, folks in the comments were connecting with each other geographically. So now you might be able to find a fishing buddy, which was pretty awesome too. And we saw different people connecting with each other and sharing advice, which was another benefit of that thread, of that post. Um, that weekly post. Folks from who lived in, I live in North Carolina. Folks who live in North Carolina would shout out their city. They would post a picture of a fish that they might have caught or an animal that they might have seen at a local lake that they fish in or a river that they fished in. And then even if someone didn't fish or, live close by, generally speaking, geographically, they could share advice with each other so that hopefully that other person could catch a fish like that too. So again, just many layers and layers of connectivity between people and the stories that they shared. And it required us listening first to uncover these opportunities to engage in a meaningful way.
Let's switch focus a little bit from external community to internal community, meaning the
Mm.
teams that you are working with. And I'm curious, what are three teams that you usually work with the most when building a community and how community impacts them?
Yeah. So I'll start with the team that I worked primarily with when I was at that company. And then I'll sort of back out with some of the other roles that I've had. So social media, and I'm just using social media to really mean, marketing, communications. Different companies obviously have different team makeups. So social media team, whatever that looks like at your organization, these are the people who are bringing in the fans. These are the people who, are able to identify those champions. Two of the three audiences that I mentioned, earlier in our conversation. Um, you know, the social media team primarily, my experience, um, has operated the most in those B2C environments, where that emotional connection drives growth. When I was, at that fishing company, I was squarely on our social media team of three people, and we managed a suite of accounts, that totaled over 4 million followers. That's a lot for a team of
Wow.
three to be producing content every day, to be engaging on that content every day. It was quite a bit. And so I want to preface this by saying I believe it's community's role, it's everyone's job at a company. Um, and so social media team, hands down, probably number one. The second I would say is product. And the reason why I'm saying product is because product delivers the value that customers are expecting, right? Especially in those B2B environments, in those, closed, let's say technical communities. That's why people are paying you the money that they're paying you. And so execution matters the most in this case. Product team, when there are issues, when there, when there are, issues with features, or perhaps there's new features that, the community is saying that we need, product is responsible for driving internal innovation, and also obviously directly impacting the bottom line. And then the third group, I guess, an extension of product would be sales or customer success, I should say. Um, and to me, I viewed sales, customer success sort of as the conduit, that converts the fans and the champions into the customers. So they're an essential piece, in that organism, for converting that passion, that energy that we want to see in our community into dollars and cents for the business. Obviously, that looks different in every organization, but I think function between product sales and social media, these teams are the ones that are, producing the engagement and producing the products that people are willing to pay for, and are the ones reducing the friction in that growth flywheel that we often hear and talk about in pitch decks, um, for community growth and the value that community brings to an organization. So, um, social media team, product engineering, and sales customer success are the three.
You've told that everyone should be a part of a community team, and it's like the best case scenario if everyone in the
Yeah.
company on the team understand the value of a community and they know the kind of rules or kind of guidelines of how to
Yeah.
connect with other participants, how to not to over spam them, not to oversell to them, and like be helpful, just be a human. And like, let's be honest, it's not that easy. And
It's not.
especially if we are talking about like marketing team or sales team, because they have different goals, they have different KPIs. Yes, they might be in line, still they have different. So I'm curious, how do you encourage folks from other teams to work with you, with the community team, without adding more work to their plate?
Oh man, if I had the answer, I'd probably be a lot wealthier than I currently am. Um, but I think this one, I think it goes back to, having shared goals. And in order to have shared goals, there needs to be a common community language at the organization. And I think that is where things get tricky, because and I think we see this, at the community level, between members. It's part of the reason why when you have a thriving community, there's a sort of language that everyone can sort of speak, where we can say something and it means a lot of different things, and we don't have to over explain it. At the organizational level, I don't think we're able to do that with community, and that is part of the problem. So whether that's coming from, the community leadership at the organization, or if that's just a shared philosophy at the organization, there needs to be a common language about the value of community. And again, this goes back to my idea, my belief that community is everyone's job, because when people buy into the idea that they have a responsibility to strengthen, to grow, to protect the community, whether you're in sales, product, social media team, operations, when you feel like you have a responsibility to, the customer, and I'm using customer not to single out customers, because remember, I like to talk about customers, fans, and champions, but I'm using customer in this context to speak the same language that business leaders are using, because in their minds, customer equals community, and we know that that's not entirely true, right? So when we think about customers, we need to make sure that we understand that customers include people who may want to be customers, people who may not be customers, but are interacting with our customers. And those are important people too. And
Mm.
so when different folks at the organization understand that, they now have a connection to those different audiences. And there's a different sense of ownership with the work that they do. There's a different quality. There are different questions that they ask when they make decisions. And when we get to that level where people now are asking different questions, now community isn't the sole responsibility of the community team, because people are asking the questions that need to be asked for the benefit of the community when you're not there, when I'm not there. And that's how we know that community is very much a part of the organization now, because people are looking at the work that they do through the lens of community. And I think that's obviously, the ideal situation, right? But we can get there when we as the community team, model the behavior that we want to see out of our colleagues, when we can show people how to think like us in the context of their own work, right? We're creating mini me's, if you will, on
Mm.
their teams, and we're empowering them to do the things that we would do if we were in their shoes. That is, man, that I know that is very um, philosophical, and that's very sort of high, pie in the sky, if you will. But I think that's a core part of what makes community community, right? Like
Yeah.
there's this intangible connection that we have to each other that feels strong, and there's a resonance that we have. And how do we create that? How do we strengthen it? How do we preserve it? That's part of the culture. And I think all too often community is seen as a function in an organization rather than a culture. So how do we shift from function to culture? A part of that is language.
Before the recording, we were talking a little bit about technologies and AI stuff and how it like moves to people from the communities and to the communities. So it's like a two-way street, and you never know how it will work in the future. But still, I'm curious, do you use AI in your community building process?
Ugh,
And if yes, how?
man, I will say yes and no.
Hmm.
Um, and I am trying to be very intentional about how I use AI, because I think all too often these days, AI is being used to strip the humanity out of things. And when we do that, we are removing opportunities to ask the types of questions that we need to ask to make our work more effective and impactful, to get to those sort of deeper levels of connection with other people internally to our organization, and also members between each other and members to the business. So we have to be, I believe we have to be very intentional about how we use and approach the world of AI. To directly answer your question, I am not sure yet, because I am still trying to, one, learn the tools, right? And so I will say, yes, I have used AI. Claude is my preferred AI tool these days, and I want to use AI as a tool just like I would a word processor or what have you. And I want to be more efficient in the work that I do. But for the sake of efficiency, if I am removing opportunities to spark or create the magic that, makes community special, from a business perspective, I am also losing opportunities to go viral online, for example, right? Or I am losing opportunities for different members of our team to inform the work that they do to possibly create, a better product or a new service or to, address a new market. So I am working on a project right now, for dog lovers, and I want to build a community for dog lovers. And if you've ever owned a dog or a pet in general, if you're a first-time pet owner, navigating pet parenthood is can be very challenging, especially as your life is changing. Maybe you're, trying to bring a human into the world, and oftentimes, your pet gets neglected in that process, but you still love your pet. Then that's just one example of many examples of how, pet ownership or pet parenthood, can be challenging. So I want to build a community for these people. And right now, I'm a team of one. And obviously, AI is very attractive for spinning up a community really quickly and, to automate connections between people. There are lots of different tools that can do community things, but I have to ask myself and pause and say, is that really building the community that I want? Is that really facilitating the types of interactions that I want community members to experience with one another? And I don't think I have an AI tool that I am comfortable with doing that at scale. But that may change in, 6 months' time. That may change tomorrow. Who knows? I might discover a really cool AI tool um, that enables me to achieve the type of culture and experience that I think pet parents want. But right now, I'm in the customer discovery phase, and Claude suffices for helping me digest information, for helping me collect information, digest it, synthesize it, and organize my thoughts. That is the extent to which AI has been beneficial to me. But beyond that, I am trying to be extremely cautious, because community is human. And if there's any AI that I want to incorporate in the work that I do, it's what I call the original AI, which is active imagination. And that is irreplaceable. That is irreplaceable. So, um, I know I didn't answer your question directly, but that's the answer you're going to get today. So you got to deal
You
with
know,
it.
I had a picture in my mind that, for example, imagine that you have to meet someone and you have to choose whether you can go by foot or use a car. And
Mm,
for example, by foot it will be an hour, and with a car it will be like 20 minutes. So it's a question whether you use car or go by foot. Because, for example, you have limited time to spend with this person.
hmm.
So when you use the car, you kind of like get faster to them, and you have
Yeah.
to spend more time with the person. And there's another variant when you are commuting somewhere with a person. So you
Hmm.
can go by foot and it will take you hour and you will have a meaningful conversation. So basically you will together reach the goal and you will spend this hour to get to know each other better. Or you can use car and get there in 20 minutes. So you will still reach the goal, but you won't build the same connections that you could have
Right.
done with while you're doing the food. So it's always like finding what is the best
There are
way.
trade-offs. Yeah,
Yeah,
there are
yeah.
definitely trade-offs. There are definitely constraints. And I think the biggest constraint for me and with the AI question is, how am I preserving and protecting the humanity in the community? Which is maybe why I'm so resistant or why I'm trying to be so vigilant with, how I would implement that. I think that there is no world where we're not using any kind of AI because that's just how integrated it is in our world now. So I think there is some expectation that we need to have AI, but how we use it and what we're specifically using, we do have control over that. So I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I hold on to that.
Tony, I wish to have the sky as a limit, but time is a limit to our conversation. So, the final question: what is one thing to do right away for someone struggling with identifying their community ROI?
Mm. I think if you've gotten this far in the podcast, there's, one thing that you've noticed about me is that I love asking questions. And so I would say it start with asking these fundamental questions and work from the inside, you, out to the business and beyond. So first question, what is community? What is our community? And do members see our community the way that we do. Because I think oftentimes, especially if you've had a community that has existed and lived for a certain period of time, those two things get disconnected. The reason why you created a community today may not be why the community exists or should exist today. And so being able to ask that question and peel that back, I think is really important. Next, I would say who at the organization is responsible for stewarding the community. So this goes back to our other question, about ROI and, collaboration. This question, I think, helps serve and answer that question. And then the third question, again, going back and we're looking at feedback loops, is why did we start this community in the first place? And does that reason still matter? Um, this is where, you might create opportunities for new innovations. This is where you might find an opportunity to sort of reinvigorate a community that may have stalled out or plateaued. Invite opportunities for members of your team and members of the community to co-create what the vision for the community is today and into the future. So I would say those are probably the three things. Let's ask
You know,
questions.
to your point of asking the question why, I feel like sometimes people skip in this moment when they're creating community and
Mhm.
they are skipping the moment who because they feel like they know their audience and they start with question how. But the best question is like why and for whom. And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like they're sometimes missing it. But last but not least, name two people I should reach out to talk about community ROI.
Oh, so I'm going to give you two names. One name is Inara Roy. She is the social media manager at a company called Sweet Lawrence. They're a cookie company. And she, when it comes to social media and community, she's one of the people who, comes top of mind, who I've learned quite a bit from. And every day I log into LinkedIn, she's working on some new campaign or it's come up with some really cool insight in connecting those two worlds together. So I would say her. And then another, I'll say I'm not going to pick a tech person. I'll choose someone from the nonprofit world just to sort of mix things up a little bit. This will be, let's say, Jeannie Smith. She recently launched a a consultancy um, where she helps nonprofits improve and really maybe recreate their narratives that they can better connect to and reinvigorate their communities. Oftentimes in the nonprofit world, it's, very hard because people are not necessarily paying money for a product or service. The emotional connection really is the motivator and the catalyst for action in the real world. And so, how do you take the mission and the passion of the people and the donors who want to do good things in the world, translate that to people who may not have heard of the organization or, you know, um, may have uh, ideas or shared interests, but haven't actually taken action yet. And messaging is the vehicle to do that. And so Jeannie is really an expert at doing that. And so I'll be happy to make those introductions for you.
Got it. I will definitely ask you, of course. And what is the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is where I'm most active these days. You can find me at linkedin.com/IN, Tony Kershaw 1. I oftentimes post about my new projects. I'm always working on a new project, and the newest project I'm working on right now is that dog community for dog parents.
Yeah. Tony, thank you so much for this conversation and for bringing me through such an emotional journey of the community of fishing fanatics and through all these experiences of working with different teams and your personal inner human approach, not just to building human connection, but also like of this genuine, I would say, I would call it genuine use of technologies while keeping in mind the
Mm,
human part. And
yeah,
yeah, I've learned so many things from you, and I'm super happy that we finally met and had this conversation. So thank you
likewise,
so much
Yuri.
for
Thank
that.
thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And yeah, see you in the community
All
world.
right, sounds good.
And thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions about how the community can help you reach and overcome your business goals faster, let's connect on LinkedIn and talk about it. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.